Thank you, Mary, and thank you, Uncle Dave, for that very generous and insightful welcome to Wurundjeri country. And I want to acknowledge the traditional owners and elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that this is stolen land, that sovereignty was never ceded, and now more than ever, it's time for treaties with our First Nations communities. And also to acknowledge, as Kathy and the Lord Mayor did, that around the world, First Nations communities are at the front line of climate impacts and are crucial to solving the climate emergency. I want to acknowledge all of the distinguished guests and also acknowledge and thank our emergency services and community volunteers who've been working so hard to protect us in the past months as we face the unprecedented coal-fuelled bushfire crisis. I also want to say welcome to all of you who are visiting this excellent electorate of Melbourne. But to every one of you, whether this is your first time or you've been here many times before, I want to say thank you, because you are a wonderful sight here. And if our global civilization can survive the environmental and climate emergency, the history books will record that on this day and in this place, you came together to find a pathway to a safe climate, and you will all be considered heroes, and you deserve a huge round of applause. Now, I've just spent the last 2 weeks in Parliament, and it is hard to describe the continued level of denial and spin that is constantly on display in Canberra. We had people whose houses had burned over the summer come up to Canberra, to the doorstep of Parliament, with what was left of their homes in wheelbarrows and buckets. They spoke powerfully and eloquently about the impacts of the climate emergency on their lives, and I was humbled to meet with some of them. But for most of Parliament, it was like they were invisible. It's like being in the twilight zone up there. You got the Barnaby and his band of nationals wanting to build more coal-fired power stations, to the Prime Minister's contortions over climate and the bushfire crisis and the shameless deception as though everything is under control, while their inaction is driving us to a 3 to 4 degree warmer world that will completely overrule and overrun our economy and society. And unfortunately, a Labor opposition that persistently defends the continued role of coal in our economy, both for energy and export, and who has dropped their 2030 targets. So it is wonderful to be back here among friends who accept the truth of the crisis and who, as Greta Thunberg says, want us to listen to the scientists and act accordingly. And as you may know, last week I was elected to be leader of the Australian Greens, and in my first media conference after becoming Greens leader, I said that I refuse to accept a future where our children need to wear gas masks because their cities are full of smoke. And I also spoke about the people that I met, who I talk to every day, and kids are foremost amongst them, who are angry and anxious and who are desperately looking for leadership. Now is the time to tell it like it is. No more spin, no more half-truths. Tell it like it is. Now is the time to face up to the reality of the powers that we face if we are to save the planet and save the future. We are in a climate emergency because of politicians and power brokers trying to preserve a status quo that sees the coal and oil and gas barons get rich and then funnel off a tiny bit of their wealth to political parties when they're in power, and then give those politicians cushy jobs in their organisation when they leave office. This is what has taken us past 1 degree of global warming, which has given us towering infernos, flooding, record heat waves, toxic air, pollution, and so much more. And the last time that there was this much carbon dioxide in the air was at least 2.6 million years ago, before humans existed. And back then, temperatures were more than 3 degrees warmer. There were trees in Antarctica and sea levels were 25 metres higher. And if we keep polluting at our current rate, We could be at 1,000 parts per million by the end of the century, and the last time that happened, dinosaurs roamed the earth. Like them, we face an existential crisis brought on by a rapid shift in the climate system, but this time it is human-induced. The warming track of up to 4 degrees that we are on is a world full of death and destruction and hopelessness. It will be a world that may be capable of only supporting 1 billion people, perhaps less. And that is horrible to contemplate, but it is real. Now, even if there was only a 1% chance of this occurring, the potential outcome is so bad that we should mobilise the entire machinery of government and society towards avoiding this possibility. When the Allies won World War II, it wasn't just because the US and other governments put their resources into winning it. The war was won because government and industry and communities worked together to meet an unprecedented threat. In 1942, America, a spark plug factory started producing machine guns. A merry-go-round factory made gun mounts. A pinball machine plant made armour-piercing shells, and a toy company started making compasses. Now, by working together, government and industry and the American people met and triumphed over an existential and unprecedented threat. Now, we don't need to militarise, we need to decarbonise. But fast forward 80 years, and nothing like that is happening in Australia. We have some amazing parts of industry, including people in this room, who are starting to transform our energy sector. And the economics are in your favour, that we know. But we also have other parts of industry trying desperately to hold back this tide, and we have a government that is joining them. Now, we had the beginnings of something in the 2010 shared power government where Greens, Labor and Independents worked together to implement the clean energy package. But later, we became the first nation ever to rescind a carbon price. Now, I have an unwavering belief that notwithstanding the current fossil fuels that are in government, that nothing will stop the clean energy revolution. Nothing will stop scientists and engineers and businesses from solving these problems. We will get there eventually. But the only problem is we don't have until eventually. We need to act super fast. If we only reach net zero by 2050, or 2060 or 2070, we will still confront disaster. And that is why the government and the whole of society must recognise we are in an emergency and take action at emergency speed, devoting all the resources we need to stop a threat that may otherwise simply become overwhelming. Now, I know that there are some who get nervous when they hear talks about emergency. Some have said, well, emergency is about reinforcing the potential for a suspension of rights. But there's also a way of talking about emergency that's not about police and military, but about rescue. Ambulances under lights and sirens take emergency action, and no one thinks they're taking away your rights. Firefighters take emergency action, and they do it to save life. We, all of us, everyone in this room, we all now need to become the firefighters of human history. We are the ones who are ringing the alarm bells, but also pointing towards the exit. And over the next 2 years, the Greens will continue to push for a declaration of environment and climate emergency by the Australian Parliament. Next fortnight, I'll introduce to the Commonwealth Parliament the Climate Emergency Declaration Bill. The bill will declare a climate emergency, require every government department to be guided by the declaration, and mandate the establishment of what in the past was called a war cabinet to guide the country through a rapid society and economy-wide mobilisation to decarbonise the economy. This bill reflects the scale of the crisis we face and represents the scale of action that is needed. Now, Winston Churchill was a flawed man and a flawed Prime Minister, but in his greatest hours, he reached across the aisle during World War II and formed a grand coalition with the Labor Party and others. And I know it seems incomprehensible that in today's political context this could happen, But instead of having reach across the aisle and have a coalition for coal, we need to fight for a coalition to tackle the climate emergency. It's what should happen, and it's what we've got to keep fighting for, because the time for appeasement is over. This is why it's time for a Green New Deal. A Green New Deal is a government-led plan of investment and action to build a clean economy and a caring society. A plan where we can fight the climate crisis and the inequality crisis at the same time. I want to create a manufacturing renaissance in this country. I want to make Australia the renewable energy superpower where people bring their businesses from overseas for cheap, clean electricity as we urgently phase out coal. Let's export renewable energy while processing our minerals and making the things the world needs here in Australia, as Ross Garnaut proposes. I want Australia to make things again, and with a Green New Deal we can. And over the coming months and years, I'll be travelling the country, hosting town hall meetings, community gatherings and kitchen table conversations, explaining how a Green New Deal can provide the hope and action we need to solve the climate crisis. Because just shouting fire at someone doesn't help them find the exit. We need to provide the pathway to safety too. Talking about emergency means ringing the alarm bells and also finding the exit. And that's what a Green New Deal, a plan for a whole of society mobilisation, provides. And I firmly believe that by showing that emergency action on climate can make people's lives better, protecting their lives and their children's lives, we will mobilise a powerful movement that will change our country and save the future. Friends, our country is on fire and our planet is heading the same way. We have no choice but to tell the truth about the crisis and to face up to what is needed. The time for half measures is over because time is running out. So please, use the next 2 days to generate the energy and ideas that is going to make our movement stronger and more powerful so that together we can save the future. Good luck and thank you.